The sun hangs low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the sprawling mansion where Mya now lives. She walks down the long driveway, her steps hesitant as the grandeur of the estate still overwhelms her. The mansion is enormous, opulent beyond anything she's ever seen in her 18 years. Large marble pillars support the high ceilings, intricate gold carvings trace every archway, and the gardens stretch endlessly in every direction, filled with perfectly crowned hedges and fountains that gleam in the setting sun. The mansion looks like it belongs in a dream, a place where princes and princesses live, but for Mya it feels more like a cage. Mya's heart flutters with a mixture of excitement and fear as she approaches the door. She's moved into this mansion believing she's found a new life with Joe, a man 4 decades her senior. Joe is wealthy, or at least that's what he told her. He's also old, gruff, and ugly. But that doesn't matter, does it? She tells herself the money will make it all worth it. Joe, a 60-year-old man, is sitting in the grand living room when she enters. He's dressed in an expensive suit, as usual, always adorned in fancy clothes that don't quite match his bulky, overweight frame. His face is harsh, with deep-set wrinkles that make him appear perpetually angry. His nose is crooked from an old injury, and his eyes are small, beady, filled with suspicion and contempt. His thinning gray hair is slicked back, and despite his wealth, his appearance exudes an unshakable ugliness. "Where've you been?" Joe growls, his voice heavy with irritation. He doesn't look up from his chair, where he's sprawled out like a king on his throne. The grand chandelier above his head casts a sharp light that accentuates the deep lines of his face. Mya feels a cold shiver run down her spine. She hesitates, gripping the strap of her purse tightly. "I was just in the garden, Joe. I didn't go far." "Yeah, well, you better let me know where you're going from now on," Joe snaps, his eyes finally meeting hers. "I don't like not knowing what my woman is up to." Mya swallows hard, nodding silently. She glances around the lavish room, trying to distract herself. The floor is a gleaming white marble, and the walls are lined with portraits of people she doesn't recognize. Aristocrats, maybe. Whoever they were, they looked like they belonged in a place like this. Not her. She tries to focus on the ornate fireplace, the marble sculptures, anything to avoid Joe's glaring eyes. He lets out a grunt, his large, stubby fingers wrapping around a glass of whiskey on the table beside him. "You're lucky to be here, you know," Joe says, taking a slow sip. His eyes never leave her face, studying her with that same cold, scrutinizing look he always gives. "Most girls like you would kill to live in a place like this." "I know, Joe," Mya whispers, forcing a smile, though her stomach churns. Joe's laugh is short, bitter. "I hope you do." He stands up, his movements slow and heavy. His belly juts out from beneath his expensive vest, stretching the fabric uncomfortably tight. He waddles over to her, his presence suffocating. "You're here because I let you be here. Don't forget that." His breath smells like stale whiskey and tobacco, and Mya forces herself not to flinch as he stands too close. She nods again, her lips trembling as she speaks. "I won't forget." Joe smirks, his eyes narrowing, He reaches out and brushes a hand along her cheek, rough and possessive. Good girl. You'll stay here because you know what's good for you. Mya remains still, fighting the urge to pull away. In the distance, she can hear the faint trickle of one of the many fountains outside. She focuses on that sound. Anything to take her mind off the man in front of her. He's not always like this, she tells herself. Sometimes he's kind. Sometimes he buys her things. Fancy clothes, jewelry. He even promised to renovate the kitchen for her. New cabinets, countertops, the works. But it's always a promise, never more than that. Still, Mya clings to the idea that maybe, just maybe, Joe will make good on those promises. The truth gnaws at her, though. Deep down, she knows why she stays. It's not love. It's the mansion, the money, the security. It's the life she thought she would never have, and she's willing to ignore Joe's ugliness and cruelty to keep it. But for how long? It's been 3 months since Mya moved into the mansion, and though the walls of the estate sparkle with the sheen of wealth, they feel increasingly like prison bars. Each day, the glamour fades a little more, revealing the cold truth beneath the surface. Mya sits on the edge of a velvet chair in the lavish sitting room, her eyes drawn to the view outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. The garden sprawls out before her, neatly trimmed hedges forming intricate patterns, vibrant flowers blooming in rich purples and reds, but it all feels so distant, like something that belongs to someone else. She hears Joe's heavy footsteps before she sees him. They echo through the grand hallways, each step a reminder of his presence. His footsteps are slow and deliberate, like the march of a man who knows he owns everything around him, including her. Mya straightens her back, her heart rate quickening. She can feel him before he even enters the room. The door swings open with a low creak, and Joe appears in the doorway, his bulk filling the space. He's dressed in another one of his expensive suits, this one a deep navy blue with gold cufflinks. The suit strains over his belly, his sagging skin making the fine fabric look ill-fitting. His face is as harsh as ever, the deep lines around his mouth seeming to carve a permanent scowl. "Where's my breakfast?" Joe barks, his small eyes narrowing as he looks at her. Mya blinks, startled. I thought the cook was making it," she stammers, her voice barely above a whisper. The cook, an elderly woman named Martha, has been in the kitchen since sunrise, as far as Mya knows. "I want you to bring it to me," Joe snaps, his voice sharp. "I don't pay these people to wait on you." Mya bites her lip, her hands gripping the armrest of the chair. She rises slowly, smoothing her dress. One Joe bought for her, of course. It's made of fine silk, soft against her skin, but it feels like a costume. Everything here does. She nods, forcing a smile. "I'll get it for you." As she hurries toward the kitchen, her mind races. Every day it's something new with Joe. Another demand, another way to remind her that she's here on his terms. She thought she could handle it. After all, he's rich, isn't he? He promised her everything she'd ever wanted. The kitchen is grand, like the rest of the mansion, with gleaming granite countertops and an enormous chandelier hanging from the ceiling. Martha stands by the stove, stirring a pot of oatmeal, her expression as worn as the apron she wears. "Morning, Miss Mya," Martha says kindly, her weathered hands moving steadily. "Morning," Mya replies quietly, gathering a tray for Joe's breakfast. As she places the food onto the tray, she hears the faint ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Time seems to stretch and bend in this house. The days blend together, and the weight of Joe's control hangs heavy on her. She brings the tray back to the sitting room, where Joe is now sprawled across the couch, flipping through a magazine. He barely glances at her as she sets the tray down in front of him. "There," she says softly, standing back. Joe doesn't respond, only grunts and begins eating, the sound of his chewing loud and obnoxious in the silent room. Mya's eyes drift to the walls, where large paintings of landscapes and noblemen decorate the space. Everything about this house screams luxury, but the emptiness makes it feel cold, detached. There's no warmth, no love here, just things, expensive things. She sits back down, folding her hands in her lap. Her mind wanders to her parents, to the life she left behind when she dropped out of school and moved in with Joe. Her friends had called her crazy. Her mother had cried for days, begging her to reconsider. "You don't know him," her mother had said. "You don't know what you're giving up, Bop." But at the time, it seemed like the opportunity of a lifetime. Mya had grown up poor, always struggling to make ends meet. The idea of living in a mansion, wearing fancy clothes, and never worrying about money again had been too tempting to resist. Now, sitting across from Joe as he devours his breakfast like a king, she wonders if she made the right choice. Joe wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, his small, beady eyes fixing on her once again. "What are you staring at?" he snaps. Mya shakes her head quickly. "Nothing, Joe. Just thinking." "Well, stop thinking so much. You're here to make me happy, remember." She nods, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I remember." Joe smirks, leaning back in his seat, his belly protruding over his belt. "Good, as long as we're clear on that." The sun sets behind the sprawling mansion, casting long shadows through the ornate windows. The opulent chandeliers inside gleam, their light reflecting off the marble floors and gilded decorations that adorn every room. The mansion is vast, much larger than Mya ever imagined, with grand staircases, high ceilings, and rooms she still hasn't explored. But despite its size and luxury, it feels suffocating. Mya finds herself standing in the kitchen, her fingers tracing the cool granite countertops, trying to shake off the tension from another day of dealing with Joe. The air is thick with the scent of freshly baked bread, and the kitchen is warm, but Mya's thoughts are elsewhere. She feels trapped, unable to breathe freely in a place that should represent freedom and wealth. Her thoughts are interrupted by a knock on the back door. It's Terence, the cabinet maker Joe hired weeks ago. He enters the kitchen, wiping the sweat from his brow, his tool belt slung low around his waist. Tall, muscular, and with a rugged charm, Terence seems out of place in the mansion's pristine environment. His hands are rough from years of hard work, and his deep brown eyes always carry a warmth that Mya finds comforting. "Evenin', Mya." Terence greets her with a kind smile, his voice deep but gentle. He's been working on remodeling the mansion's kitchen for a while now, and Mya has found his presence a rare relief from the tension she feels around Joe. "Hey, Terence," she replies, her voice soft. She can't help but smile when he's around. "I was just thinking about the new cabinets." Joe wants something extravagant. Terence nods, glancing around the kitchen. "That's what he's. But I'm more interested in what you want, Mya. You're the one who's going to be using this kitchen the most, right?" Mya blinks, caught off guard. No one ever asks her what she wants. "I guess I'd like something simple, maybe white with gold handles. Something clean, elegant." Terence smiles again. "I can do that." Simple and elegant sounds perfect. Before she can respond, Joe's heavy footsteps echo down the hallway, and Mya's heart skips a beat. Joe barges into the kitchen, his face twisted in irritation. He's wearing yet another one of his garish suits, this one a deep maroon, which does nothing to hide the growing gut beneath it. "What's going on in here?" Joe demands, his small eyes darting between Mya and Terence. He scowls, the lines on his face deepening. "You two havin' a little chat." Mya's throat tightens, but before she can answer, Joe's voice cuts through the air again, this time sharper. "Your job. I pay you to build cabinets, not flirt with my girl." Joe spat, his face darkening with rage. "If this happens again, you're fired." Terence holds his hands up, his expression calm but firm. "I'm just doing my job, Joe. Nothing more." Joe steps forward, puffing out his chest like an angry bull. His face is flushed red, and his words come out in a sneer. "Don't test me, boy. You think you can come into my house and sweet-talk my girl. One more slip up and you're out. Understand?" Terence nods slowly, holding Joe's gaze without flinching. "Understood, Mr. Joe." Without another word, Joe turns on his heel and storms out of the kitchen, muttering under his breath. The tension lingers in the air long after he's gone, and Mya can feel her heart pounding in her chest. She looks at Terence, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry about that," she whispers, her eyes darting to the floor. "He's not always like this." The Terence shakes his head and smiles softly. "You don't have to apologize, Mya. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong." He steps closer, his tone gentle but sincere. "You're too sweet of a person for me to be mad at, Joe. He's set in his ways. You're not gonna change him." Mya feels a lump form in her throat. She knows Terence is right, but the thought of leaving Joe, leaving behind the mansion, the promise of wealth, terrifies her. Terence places a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. "You can't change a person who has no self-control. You can only change you." His words linger in the air, sinking deep into Mya's mind. She looks up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I don't know what to do." Terence gives her a kind smile, his eyes filled with understanding. "Just take care of yourself, Mya. That's all you can do." Later that night, Joe's snoring fills the mansion like a distant rumble of thunder as Mya sits up in bed, staring at the ceiling. She can't shake the conversation with Terence from her mind. She knows he's right, but the fear of what would happen if she left Joe is overwhelming. After making sure Joe is deep asleep, she tiptoes out of the room and heads down to the kitchen, where she finds Terence still packing up his tools. The moment she steps into the room, he looks up, a soft smile on his face. "I wanted to thank you," Mya whispers, "for earlier. I needed to hear that." Terence chuckles softly. "No need to thank me, Mya. I just call it like I see it." She hesitates for a moment. "It's just I don't know how much more of this I can take. He's different now. Worse." Terence sets his tools down, his expression serious. "Mya, you deserve better than this. You know that, right?" She nods, but the knot in her chest tightens. "It's just complicated." Terence steps closer, his gaze locked on hers. "Complicated or not, you don't have to live like this." Mya bites her lip, her heart racing as his words sink in. "I know," she whispers, her voice barely audible. Terence reaches out and gently touches her hand. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here. You don't have to go through this alone." Mya smiles weakly, her heart aching with the weight of her situation. "Thank you, Terence. That means a lot." Terence nods, his warm gaze never leaving hers. "Anytime, Mya. Anytime." It feels increasingly cold and empty to Mya. She walks through the halls, her footsteps echoing against the marble floors, passing gold framed paintings of people she doesn't recognize. One painting, in particular, has been drawing her attention more and more lately. It's of a strikingly beautiful woman with long, flowing dark hair and eyes that seem to follow Mya wherever she moves. The woman is dressed in a flowing, elegant gown, standing in front of a grand fireplace, the mansion in the background. Mya has noticed Joe staring at this painting often, his expression unreadable, his gaze intense. The woman's beauty is undeniable, and each time Mya catches Joe looking at the portrait, her stomach knots with insecurity. "Who is she?" Mya had asked Joe once, tentatively. Joe snapped at her, his voice booming through the grand hallway. "Woman. Mind your own damn business." His face had turned an alarming shade of red, and he stormed off before she could ask again. Mya didn't dare bring it up after that, but the image of the woman haunts her. The mansion is filled with secrets, shadows that creep into her mind when she's alone. And lately, Joe's been disappearing into the night, slipping out of the mansion without a word, leaving Mya in the silence of the giant house, where every creak and groan of the floorboards makes her jump. The clock strikes midnight, and Mya is lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for Joe to come back. The house feels eerily quiet, too quiet for a mansion of its size. The silence is almost oppressive, the kind that makes you hyper-aware of every small sound. Suddenly, Mya hears the faintest creak. Footsteps, but not Joe's heavy, lumbering ones. These are light, deliberate. She sits up in bed, her heart racing as she listens. The noise is coming from the east wing, where she rarely goes. It's almost as if someone is walking through the mansion, moving from room to room. Panic grips her. Is someone else in the house? Mya rushes to the bedroom window and pulls back the heavy velvet curtains. She peers out into the darkness, her breath fogging up the glass. Through the window, she can see the east wing, dimly lit by the moonlight. And there, a silhouette of a woman walking from one room to the next. Her heart skips a beat, her pulse quickening. Who is that? She backs away from the window, her mind racing. Has someone broken in? Or worse, has someone been living in the mansion all along, hiding in the shadows? The thought sends a chill down her spine. She grabs her robe and rushes out of the room, determined to find Joe and tell him. Mya finds Joe. She descends the grand staircase and finds Joe sitting in the dimly lit drawing room, staring at the painting of the mysterious woman again. His face is somber, almost melancholic, and for a moment, he looks like a different man, a stranger to her. Joe, she calls out, her voice trembling. I think there's someone in the house. Joe doesn't even turn to look at her. His eyes remain fixed on the portrait. There's no one here but us, he says, his tone dismissive. You're imagining things. Stop watching horror movies. Mya frowns, stepping closer. I'm serious, Joe. I saw someone walking through the east wing. Joe finally turns to her, his expression darkening. I said, there's no one else here, he snaps. You're tired, Mya. You're seeing things. Mya swallows hard, her throat dry. I might be tired, but I swear I saw someone. Joe stands up abruptly, towering over her. Are you tired of this relationship? His voice is low, dangerous. Mya's heart pounds. No, of course not. You better not be tired. Joe interrupts, his eyes narrowing. You better not, or you and that crybaby son of yours will be out on the streets. Mya flinches at his words, biting back the sting of tears. She nods silently, feeling the familiar weight of fear settle over her. Joe huffs and storms past her, leaving her standing alone in the room, her chest tight with anxiety. As Joe disappears into the dark hallway, Mya remains frozen in place, her mind swirling with thoughts of the silhouette, the mysterious woman in the painting, and Joe's increasingly erratic behavior. The mansion, once a symbol of hope, now feels like a prison, filled with ghosts, real or imagined. Mya wraps her arms around herself, shivering despite the warmth of the room. Days later, the days blur together and the strange occurrences continue. Mya finds herself avoiding the east wing entirely, but sometimes, out of the corner of her eye, she sees that same figure. A fleeting glimpse of the woman, moving silently from room to room. She doesn't tell Joe again. She knows better than to bring it up, fearing his wrath. Instead, Mya tries to busy herself with the household chores. But the mansion is too large, too empty. The isolation wears on her, and the only solace she finds is in her brief interactions with Terence. Joe continues to disappear at odd hours of the night, leaving Mya to wonder where he goes. She's too afraid to ask. She's too afraid of what the answer might be. Whenever she tries, he snaps at her, his temper flaring up like a match to gasoline. The mansion, once magnificent in her eyes, now feels haunted. The marble floors, the grand staircase, the chandeliers that once filled her with a now feel like part of a trap, designed to keep her here, in this nightmare. Even the golden frames around the paintings seemed to mock her, reminders of the life she thought she would have, but never truly received. 5 years pass, and Mya's life in the mansion grows more complicated with each passing day. The once luxurious home now feels like a prison, each beautiful detail weighed down by the tension and fear that has settled in her heart. Mya's high school friends convinced her to have Joe's baby, to always have that as a reason to keep money in her pocket in case things didn't work out with Joe. Her son Nicholas is no longer a baby. He's now a curious, energetic 5-year-old. But life with Joe is no better, it's worse. Joe always wanted a son, but doesn't want his son Nicholas because he was born partially deaf. Joe blames Mya for Nicholas' deafness because he says she didn't eat the right foods during her pregnancy. Mya walks the halls of the mansion, her thoughts heavy, as the soft patter of Nicholas' footsteps echoes behind her. "Mama?" "Cereal!" Nicholas whines, tugging on her robe. His small face, usually full of joy, is now scrunched in hunger. "All right, baby. Mama will get it for you," she says softly, kneeling down to his level and brushing his curly hair from his forehead. His eyes light up momentarily, but they're quickly filled with tears as Joe's booming voice echoes from the living room. "Mya, get your crybaby son out of here. I'm sick and tired of his whining." Joe barks, stomping into the kitchen, his large frame casting a shadow over them. He's dressed in one of his usual fancy silk shirts, but it does nothing to hide his growing gut. His face is as sour as ever, puffy with age. Dark circles under his eyes from too many nights of drinking and sneaking out. Mya's heart pounds in her chest as she picks Nicholas up, holding him close to her. "I'll get him some food," she says quickly, hoping to diffuse Joe's anger before it flares out of control. "You better. I didn't sign up to hear him crying all the damn time." Joe spits, glaring at Nicholas with disdain. Nicholas, sensing the tension, buries his face in Mya's neck, his small body trembling. Mya holds him tighter, her throat tightening with the familiar sting of helplessness. She quickly grabs a box of cereal and pours some into a bowl, hoping to calm her son down before Joe's temper gets worse. As she hands Nicholas his bowl, she can't help but glance out the kitchen window. The mansion's gardens, lush and sprawling with perfectly trimmed hedges, seem peaceful in stark contrast to the turmoil inside. But the east wing, the side of the mansion she's come to dread, still haunts her. Even now, she can't shake the feeling that someone or something lives there. Later that evening, Mya tries to keep herself busy, tending to Nicholas and cleaning up around the house. The grand staircase, with its intricately carved balustrades, leads up to endless corridors, but Mya stays away from the east wing. Joe is lounging in his usual spot, staring blankly at the TV, a glass of whiskey in hand. It's become his routine, drinking, zoning out, snapping at her and Nicholas whenever they make a sound. As she moves through the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, she catches Joe staring at that portrait again, the one of the beautiful woman. Her heart clenches in her chest, the same question bubbling up inside her, but she knows better than to ask again. Nicholas's small voice breaks her thoughts. He tugs on her apron, looking up towards her with wide eyes. Mya swallows hard. He's just resting, baby. But she knows that's a lie. Joe has been disappearing more and more lately, slipping out into the night without a word. He never tells her where he goes, and she's too afraid to ask. She suspects it has something to do with the woman in the painting. But every time she gets close to confronting him, Joe's temper flares and she backs down. It happens that same night, after Nicholas is tucked into bed. Mya is sitting in the living room trying to read a book when Joe walks in, his usual scowl plastered on his face. "Mya, I'm getting real tired of your attitude," he snaps, standing over her. Mya looks up from her book, her heart racing. "What do you mean? You've been acting strange, like you don't want to be here anymore," Joe says, his voice low and threatening. "You tired of me? You tired of this house?" Mya's breath catches in her throat. She opens her mouth to speak, but the words stick, fear freezing her in place. "You better not be," Joe growls, stepping closer, his face inches from hers. "'Cause if you're thinking of leaving me, you and that crybaby of yours will be out on the streets faster than you can blink." Mya nods quickly, tears welling in her eyes. "No, Joe, I'm not tired. I'm just stressed. That's all." Joe's eyes narrow, studying her face for a moment. Then he scoffs, stepping back. "Good. You better remember your place." As the days pass, the mysterious woman continues to haunt Mya's thoughts. Every time she looks out the window or passes by the east wing, she feels a strange presence, a coldness that seeps into her bones. One night, after Joe has disappeared into the night again, she sees the woman's silhouette moving through the windows once more. This time, Mya's fear is mixed with curiosity. Who is she? Is she real or just a figment of her imagination, as Joe keeps insisting? It's early morning when Mya wakes to the sound of Nicholas crying. He's hungry again, and Joe is nowhere to be found. As she rushes to calm her son, she glances out the window, her gaze once again drifting to the east wing. But this time, something feels different. The air is thick with tension, and Mya's stomach churns with a sense of impending doom. As she carries Nicholas downstairs, trying to soothe him, she hears the front door slam. Joe walks in, his face flushed, his eyes wild. "Where the hell have you been?" Mya blurts out, her voice trembling. It's the first time in years she's dared to confront him directly. Joe's eyes darken, and he steps toward her, his fists clenched. "I don't answer to you, woman." Mya's heart pounds, but she stands her ground, cradling Nicholas protectively in her arms. "I deserve to know, Joe. You're always disappearing, always angry. What's going on?" Joe sneers, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "You want to know what's going on? You and that kid of yours are lucky I even let you stay in this house. You don't ask me questions. You do what you're told." Mya's hands shake as she holds Nicholas tighter, the weight of Joe's words crushing her spirit. She's trapped, under the weight of his cruelty, but there's nowhere to go, nowhere to run.
Another reason Joe wondered at night was Nina. Her presence haunted him like a ghost, a reminder of the life he could have had if he hadn't ruined everything. The truth was, Joe had never gotten over Nina, not fully. Even though they had divorced, the bond they shared once was still lodged deep within his heart. He hated her for leaving him, but he also hated himself for driving her away. He had stared at her portrait on the mansion wall for hours, remembering their early days, before the lies, before the greed. Nina had taken him in when he had nothing. She believed in him when no one else would, but Joe had squandered that trust, pushing her away with his manipulative ways until she couldn't take it anymore. When Nina finally rejected him, refusing to continue their marriage and moving to a separate wing of the mansion, Joe was devastated. He felt abandoned, humiliated. His nights out were partly a futile attempt to escape the pain of her rejection. He would find solace in local bars, drowning his sorrows in drinking, trying to forget the way Nina looked at him with disgust whenever they crossed paths. He knew he couldn't hide from the truth forever. Nina was the true owner of the mansion, the businesses, the lifestyle he pretended was his. And the more Mya questioned things, the more desperate Joe became. One cold night, when Joe was returning from another of his aimless drives, he found himself parked outside a small church at the edge of town. The lights inside were dim, but a solitary figure stood in front of the wooden doors, a preacher, tall and thin with eyes that seemed to see right through Joe's facade. Joe had no intention of speaking to the man, but something in the preacher's gaze pulled him in. He got out of the car, his breath fogging in the chilly air, and walked toward the church steps. "You look like a man carrying a heavy burden," the preacher said, his voice calm but piercing. Joe scoffed, leaning against the side of his car. "What do you know about it?" "More than you think," the preacher replied. "You've got demons on your back. I can see it in your eyes. You've spent years running from the truth, haven't you?" Joe shifted uncomfortably, but didn't respond. The preacher continued, "Let me tell you something, son. No matter how far you run, you can't escape the man in the mirror. And if you don't turn your life around, if you don't repent and make things right, you'll be destroyed." Joe's stomach twisted at the word destroyed. He had never considered himself a religious man, but something about the preacher's words struck a chord deep down inside him. Destruction. Was that what he was headed for? Was he already gone too far? "I ain't got time for this," Joe muttered, turning to leave, but the preacher's next words stopped him in his tracks. "It's not too late to change, Joe. You don't have to be the man you've always been, but if you keep going down this path, you won't like where it ends." Joe froze, his heart pounding in his chest. How did this man know his name? He turned back, but the preacher was already walking away, disappearing into the shadows of the church. That encounter stayed with Joe, haunting him more than he'd like to admit. He wanted to change. Part of him truly did. He was tired of the lies, the manipulation, the constant fear of being found out. He wanted to be a better man for Mya, for Nicholas, but he didn't know how. The preacher's words echoed in his mind, especially during those long, sleepless nights. You don't have to be the man you've always been. Joe would lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if it was possible. Could he change? Could he undo all the damage he'd caused, or was it too far gone? Every time Mya smiled at him, hopeful and trusting, his heart ached with guilt. He was living on borrowed time, and he knew it. He wanted to keep her, to make things right, but his fear of losing her paralyzed him. One night, after a particularly harsh argument with Mya, Joe sat alone in the mansion's grand living room, staring at the flickering flames in the fireplace. He thought about everything, the lies, the secrets, the preacher's warning, and for a brief moment he felt something he hadn't felt in years: remorse. He looked at the photo of Mya and Nicholas on the mantel, their faces full of life and innocence. They deserved better. They deserved a man who would love them without conditions, without manipulation, without abuse. Joe clenched his fists, frustrated with himself. "I want to change," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the crackling fire, "but I don't know how." And in that moment, Joe realized that he had been his own worst enemy all along. The destruction the preacher had warned him about wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from within. If he didn't change, if he didn't find a way to do better, he would lose everything that mattered. But old habits end hard, and Joe had spent a lifetime running from the truth. He didn't know if he could stop, and in the end, it was that inner struggle, his desire to change, but his inability to do so, that led him to an unpredicted end. Mya wakes up the next morning with a sinking feeling in her chest. The tension in the mansion has become unbearable, and Joel's cruelty toward her and Nicholas is wearing her down. She knows she needs to make a change, but up until now, fear has kept her frozen. Mya tried to do everything to keep her relationship with Joe intact. But now, the grandeur of the mansion is suffocating a reminder of the life she thought she was signing up for, but now feels like a gilded prison beyond control. Every elegant room and luxurious detail only underscores the fact that she's trapped. Joe is nowhere to be found. Having left the mansion before dawn without a word, Mya takes a deep breath, her hands trembling as she decides it's time to act. She can't let this continue, not for her son's sake and not for her own. She makes her way to Nicholas's room, where the boy is playing quietly with his toys. His face lights up when he sees her, but Mya can't shake the sadness that grips her every time she looks into his innocent eyes. "Nicholas, sweetheart," Mya says softly, kneeling beside her son, "we need to get ready, okay? We're going to leave soon." Nicholas looks at her curiously, not fully understanding what she means, but Mya's heart aches with determination. She needs to escape Joe's grip, and she needs to do it now. She begins packing their things in silence, grabbing only the essentials: clothes, toys for Nicholas, her personal belongings. Each movement feels like a small rebellion, a step closer to freedom. Mya's mind races as she moves from room to room, thinking all the time Joe had belittled her, insulted her, and treated her like she was nothing. It's over. She won't let him ruin their lives anymore. But even as she packs, Mya can't ignore the nagging thought in her mind: Joe isn't going to let her leave easily. Hours pass, and Mya is almost finished packing when the front door slams open with a force that rattles the walls. Joe is home. He storms into the mansion, his face twisted in anger, his hands clenched into fists. "What is this?" he shouts, spouting the suitcases by the door. Let me repeat that. "What the heck is this?" he shouts, spotting the suitcases by the door. His eyes narrow on Mya, who stands frozen in the foyer, clutching Nicholas's pack. Mya swallows, her pulse racing. "Joe, You're leaving? You think you can just walk out of here with my son?" Joe's voice booms through the mansion, his face growing red with fury. Mya takes a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Joe, I can't do this anymore. You're cruel and Nicholas deserves better. We deserve better." Joe steps toward her, his large frame towering over her small one. His breath reeks of alcohol, and his eyes are wild with rage. "You're not taking him anywhere," he growls. "You think you can just leave me? After everything I've done for you? I gave you this house, this life." "What the heck is this?" he shouts, spotting the suitcases by the door. His eyes narrow on Mya, who stands frozen in the foyer clutching Nicholas's pack. Mya swallows, her pulse racing. "Joe, You're leaving? You think you can just walk out of here with my son?" Joe's voice booms through the mansion, his face growing red with fury. Mya takes a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Joe, I can't do this anymore. You're cruel and Nicholas deserves better. We deserve better." Joe steps toward her, his large frame towering over her small one. His breath reeks of alcohol, and his eyes are wild with rage. "You're not taking him anywhere," he growls. "You think you can just leave me? After everything I've done for you? I gave you this house, this life." Mya's voice trembles, but she stands her ground. "You gave me nothing but pain, Joe. I can't let Nicholas grow up in this way." Before Joe can respond, the sound of footsteps from the kitchen interrupts them. Terrence enters. Having just arrived to finish his work on the kitchen cabinets, he takes one look at the scene in front of him, Mya's fear, Joe's rage, and instantly knows something is wrong. "What's going on here?" Terrence asks, his voice calm but firm. Joe's eyes dart to Terrence, and in an instant his anger shifts. "You, Joe Spitz! You think this is your business? Think you can steal my girl?" Terrence squares his shoulders, not backing down. "I'm just here to finish the cabinets, Joe." "You're a liar," Joe sneers. "You've been getting too close. Think I don't see it?" He steps closer to Terrence, his fists clenched. "Your job is to build cabinets, not flirt with my girl. If this happens again, you're in for it." Mya watches in horror as Joe's anger escalates. She wants to intervene, to stop the confrontation before it gets worse, but she's paralyzed with fear. Her heart pounds in her chest, her mind racing. Joe shoves Terrence, his face twisted in rage. "You're the reason she's leaving, aren't you? You think I don't know it?" Before Terrence can respond, Joe lunges at him, fists flying. The two men struggle, the sound of their scuffle echoing through the grand mansion. Mya screams, clutching Nicholas to her chest as she watches the fight unfold. In the chaos of the fight, something terrible happens. Nicholas, standing at the top of the grand staircase, watches in confusion. Mya's scream pierces the air as she sees him lose his balance. "Nicholas!" she yells, but it's too late. Nicholas tumbles down the stairs, his small body bouncing off the marble steps, his cry of pain echoing in the grand foyer. The moment feels like it stretches for an eternity as Mya watches in horror, unable to move, unable to breathe. Everything seems to move in slow motion. The sound of Nicholas hitting the ground, the silence that follows, the look of shock on Joe's face as he realizes what's happened. Terrence shoves Joe away and rushes to Nicholas, but Joe, in a panic, bolts for the back door. "Joe!" Mya screams, but he's already gone, disappearing into the woods behind the mansion. Terrence doesn't hesitate. He sprints after Joe, his heart pounding with adrenaline. The woods are thick and dark, the air heavy with the smell of wet earth and leaves. Joe's large figure crashes through the underbrush, but Terrence is faster. He can hear Joe's labored breathing ahead of him, the man's panic driving him deeper into the woods. Terrence catches up with him just as Joe stumbles down a steep hill, his foot catching on a tree root. Joe's body pitches forward, tumbling down the slope. Terrence watches frozen in shock as Joe's head hits a jagged rock on the bottom with a sickening crack. The forest falls silent. Terrence stands at the top of the hill, staring down at Joe's motionless body, his mind reeling. Did this just happen? Is Joe... He fumbles for his phone, his fingers shaking as he dials 911. There's been an accident, he says, his voice hoarse. We need help. Back at the mansion, Mya rides with Nicholas in the ambulance. Her heart shattered into a million. She grips her son's hand tightly, whispering prayers under her breath, begging for him to be okay. The lights of the hospital flash by, the sound of the sirens drowning out everything else. Mya can't stop the tears from falling, her chest tight with fear. When they arrive at the hospital, Mya refuses to leave Nicholas's side, even as the doctors rush him into surgery. She paces the sterile waiting room, her hands shaking, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Terrence arrives shortly after, his face pale with worry. He sits beside Mya, his presence a quiet comfort. They don't speak for a long time. The weight of everything that's happening hanging heavily in the air, but finally Terrence breaks the silence. I love you, Mya, he says quietly, his voice full of emotion. I've loved you for years. I just never told you because, well, I didn't want to make things harder for you. Mya looks up at him, her eyes filled with tears. She's overwhelmed by everything. Joe's demise, Nicholas's injury, and now this confession. Terrence, I don't know what to say. I'm not ready. Terrence nods, understanding. I know. I just needed you to know. I'll wait as long as it takes. You and Nicholas are what matters. Mya leans into him, grateful for his support. They sit in silence, waiting for news on Nicholas, their hearts heavy but united. The hospital is eerily quiet as Mya sits beside Nicholas's bed, holding his small hand in hers. The steady beeping of the machines is the only sound, a cold reminder of the fragility of life. The doctor's words still echo in her head. Nicholas needs surgery, and there's a chance he might not survive. The weight of that reality presses down on her chest like a heavy stone. Terrence sits across from her, his eyes focused on Nicholas, worry etched deeply into his face. He hasn't left Mya's side since they arrived. He's been her rock, offering support in silence, letting her know she's not alone. But the fear of what might happen looms over them both. Mya wipes away a tear and whispers, He's been through so much. I don't know how much more I can take, Terrence. Terrence leans forward, taking her free hand in his. He's strong, Mya. He gets that from you, and no matter what happens, we'll face it together. Hours pass before the surgeon comes in, pulling down his mask. Mya stands up immediately, her heart racing. The surgery was successful, the doctor says, and Mya's knees nearly give way in relief. Nicholas should regain his hearing fully once he fully recovers from the concussion. He's a lucky and blessed boy. Mya breaks down into tears, her hands trembling. She falls into her knees, praising the Lord. Thank you, God. Thank you. Terrence kneels beside her, wrapping his arms around her as they cry together. overwhelmed with gratitude. You did it, Mya. You made the right choice by getting him here in time. I couldn't have done it without you, she says, leaning her head against his chest. She feels safe in his arms for the first time in years, like everything might just turn out okay. But we have to give all of our praise to the Lord. The next few days are a blur as Nicholas begins his recovery. Mya stays by his bedside, stroking his hair and singing him lullabies like she used to when he was little. Terrence visits every day, bringing food, flowers, and gifts for Nicholas. On the third day, something miraculous happens. Nicholas stirs from his sleep, slowly blinking his eyes open. At first, Mya thinks it's just a trick of the light, but then he turns his head toward her and looks directly into her eyes. "Mama," he says, his voice hoarse but filled with wonder. Mya's heart leaps in her chest. "Nicholas, can you hear me? Can you see me?" He nods slowly, his lips curling into a weak smile. I can see you, Mama, and I can hear you." Mya throws her arms around him, sobbing with joy. "Thank you, Lord. Thank you for bringing my son back to me." Terrence watches from the doorway, his heart swelling at the sight. He's never seen Mya so full of life, so free from the burden she's carried for so long. In that moment, he knows he'll never stop loving her. Nicholas's recovery is swift, and within a week, he's able to leave the hospital. Mya holds his hand tightly as they walk out into the bright sunlight. She feels like she's been given a second chance, not just at life, but at happiness. Terrence is waiting by his truck, smiling as they approach. He opens the door for Mya and helps Nicholas into the... "I've got a surprise for you," Terrence says as they drive down the long road toward the mansion. Mya glances at him, her curiosity piqued. "What kind of surprise? You'll see." The days after leaving the hospital are the brightest ones Mya has had in years. Gone is the shadow of Joe's cruelty, the weight of his manipulation. Now her focus is on healing, both for herself and for Nicholas, and she's determined to create a better life for the two of them. Terrence becomes an increasingly important part of that new life. He's there for Nicholas's checkups, helping around the house, and spending long hours with Mya, talking, laughing, and slowly building something new between them. One evening, after a particularly beautiful day spent at the park with Nicholas, Terrence walks Mya up to the porch of the small house she and Nicholas are renting. "Mya," he begins, his voice soft, "I've been thinking a lot about everything we've been through. You and Nicholas mean everything to me, and I don't want to wait any more." Mya turns to face him, her heart racing, unsure of what he's about to say. Terrence reaches into his jacket and pulls out a small velvet box. He gets down on one knee, looking up at Mya with love and sincerity. "Will you marry me, Mya? I want to spend the rest of my life with you and Nicholas. I promise to love you both, to be there for you, to protect you in ways Joe never did. You deserve happiness, Mya, and I want to be the man who gives that to you." Mya gasps, her hand flying to her mouth as tears spring to her eyes. She's been through so much pain, so much heartache, And now she's being offered a chance at real love, real happiness. But she hesitates for a moment, remembering her vow to take her time. Terrence, I love you, I do, but I need to know this is real. I don't want to rush into anything for the wrong reasons. Terrence stands up, taking her hands in his. I understand, Mya, and I'm willing to wait as long as you need. But I want you to know that my love for you is real. It's not about the mansion or the money. It's about you. It's about Nicholas. It's about us. Mya smiles through her tears. Yes. Yes. I'll marry you, Terrence. Terrence slips the ring onto her finger and they kiss under the stars, their hearts full of love and promise for the future. A year later, Mya and Terrence are married in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. Mya wears a stunning white gown, the soft fabric flowing around her as she walks down the aisle, her heart pounding with joy. The room is filled with light, the air fragrant with flowers. Nicholas, now fully recovered, stands proudly beside her, beaming at the sight of his mother's happiness. And all of Mya's family is there, her parents and all of her siblings and her high school friends, showing their love and full support. Terrence waits for her at the altar, his eyes filled with love and admiration. When she reaches him, they take each other's hands, their connection undeniable. The ceremony is beautiful and simple, a reflection of the love they share, pure, strong, and unshakable. After the wedding, Mya, Terrence, and Nicholas move into a modest but cozy home that they are buying now, no longer renting. Far away from the shadows of the mansion, life becomes peaceful, filled with laughter and love. Terrence adopts Nicholas as his own, and the two of them form a bond that rivals even the strongest father-son relationships. Terrence treats Mya with kindness and respect, showing her what real love is. He listens to her, supports her dreams, and makes her feel valued in a way Joe never did. For the first time in her life, Mya feels truly loved. Together, they build a beautiful life, one filled with joy, faith, and hope for the future. Mya becomes a substitute teacher at a school for the blind and deaf, using her experience with Nicholas to help other children. Terrence continues his work as a carpenter, and the two of them thrive in their new life together. They are a family now, strong, united, and full of love. And for Mya, it's more than she ever dreamed possible. I thank you for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up and like and subscribe to my channel, and share this video on your social media. Oh, the drama.